Welcome to Designing Hollywood Podcast, Home Edition. I'm your host, Phillip Boutte Jr. Designing Hollywood is a podcast dedicated to all things movies, the movie industry, and its talented professionals. Our guest today is a costume designer of Portuguese heritage. He is best known for his work in Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water, for which he received an Academy Award nomination for Best Costume Design at the 90th Annual Academy Awards. He is a highly artistic person, thoughtful, and kind. His talent is closely followed by his passion for design and an impressive work ethic. He can be quiet, but that is his brilliance working. And he is always thinking, learning, and trying to figure out the best way to get the most impressive work on screen. His credits include Charlie Bartlett, Love and Monsters, Shape of Water, The Strain Season 1, which I love, It, Carrie, and most recently, the highly anticipated Nightmare Alley. Please welcome Luis Sequeira.
Hey, how are you?
How are you, sir?
I'm good. I need you to write my bio, please.
I'm here all day. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate having you.
Oh, thank you. Please, it's an honor to be asked to join in.
I have a quote, I think that's from you, that says, I think actors feel, the actor feels the character when they put the clothes on. And I noticed that you had quite the career in costume design. Just in general, you grew up being an artistic person and really loving art. And then you got into film. Rumor has it that you had a clothing line and even your own store at the ripe old age of 24. So
I did.
I want you to kind of walk me through your earliest moments of being interested in costume, fashion, just the field itself, and kind of like what your thought processes were and how you were kind of moving forward with that.
Well, I mean, really early, it was Clubland. And it was, back in the day when the earth was cooling, we all made our clothes for the weekend. And so it was this mad panic to get our duds ready for Saturday night. So consequently, a bunch of us would get together and fabric swatch and buy and make and, basically hem on the way to the club. And that was, that was following fashion and actually following films back then. Films influenced fashion out of Africa. And so, we started doing this whole thing with that theme in mind, and the same thing with The Hunger. And, these are like iconic films that actually influenced club wear back in the day. Anyway, so that's how I started. And then I thought, oh, well, let's make this a career. And so I had an atelier, and rather than having an atelier in a building, I had it in a storefront. And so behind the wall of the store was the atelier, and up front was a small store, a very small little wee thing. Anyway, what was great about that is that I showcased local designers, young designers. So there were about 5 of us there that had our stuff. And I met one of the shoppers on a David Cronenberg film. And so I lent some stuff for a fitting, and they loved it. And then I got to know them, and they said, why don't you come down and have a chat with us? You're, 24, you've got a store, you've got a line, like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
And for me, it was a very solitary life, which I kind of didn't love. And when I was introduced to film, it really was about this collaborative village, it was. And so for me, that was really exciting. Not only could I do what I love to do, but work with other people. And also the sets, the whole thing about walking. One of my first jobs was on Friday the 13th, the series, as a trainee. And I walk into Curious Goods, which is the antique store, and it smelled like an antique store. It had cobwebs, it had dust all over it, and then you turn the corner, it was all plank wood. And so for me, I don't know, those early days, it was all about this kind of gypsy culture of us, bringing together everyone's creativity and creating a world that was oh so fake, and then tearing it all down and seeing an empty studio, and it became very cathartic for me. It was like this thing that I really love to do. Even to this day, I love to be there at the final day when it's totally empty, because there's a sense of accomplishment.
You know, that was something that I think even just for me now in my career with like concept art, that's the one thing that I miss about production design was I like it's hard to explain to people, and I'm glad you said that, which was the best feeling for me is like after it's all over, especially like if I was doing like a big music video because they're crazy, right? And they're super fast, and you've built this set, and the artist comes in and they're singing and doing the whole thing. And then there's that moment of calm, especially after you do your breakdown and everything's back to being empty, and it's just like this sigh of like, I don't know what it feels like. It just feels really nice. Like it's like like you said, like a full accomplishment.
Totally.
Full process. And then you get to take a break and then you do it again. You know, you do it again and
Yeah,
again.
a whole other world, a whole other story, a whole,
Right.
and so, and then that gets your creative juices going in a whole different direction, which is, I've said it before, like how great it is to do what you love for a living,
Yes.
rather than just kind of do what you love on the side. Listen, I
Yes.
do it. It's my main course.
Main course, yes. And I love that too. And the fact that one of the things that I want to point out to our listeners that Lewis said that's really important, which was you noticed at first when he had his store, he was able to transition that from like a love that he had, but it was kind of solitary, into something where he was able to collaborate with others, which kind of brought that process full circle. Because I know that the collaboration process, and especially like I think the artistic process of like having that support of your community and being part of the creative community is really important. So I'm glad that that's something that you pointed out as well. When you, I want to, I guess, start to also talk about, now that you've talked about like your earliest moments and you transitioning into costume, uh, has your process, or explain to me your process, like, because I know each designer is different. Like, how do you start to go from making clothes, making clothes for clubs and people, and then moving into storytelling? Like, how did you start to make that transition?
I think for me, it really was, classic, love of film, love of the storytelling in film. And I was someone who would, if I really loved the film and loved everything about it, I would see it 20 times, 15 times. And for me, the success of that was actually, okay, I've seen that. Now what else can I find? What else can I see? And that for me, I think in costume design as well, is I try to lay in as much as I can, as many layers as I can. And even if we think we're not going to see it, there may be a shot down the road that we will see it, and that'll be a beautiful thing. And how I segued from that was really started as a trainee, and I learned every department, every subcategory. So one of my first jobs was learning how to age costumes, and that was before internet. So we went to the library and
Right.
we looked up,
The
mold. We looked up mold and dead people, and I learned how to, I used my painting abilities to recreate that, and so I did that, and then I was a truck person, and then I was a supervisor and assistant designer, and through that I worked my way into costume.
Did you find that, I think, because this is something that actually has been a common thread with some of the designers, especially just starting out, do you find that that kind of full process in terms of like having done different jobs in the department really helps you now?
I would say 125, 200%. I mean, there is no way I'd be the designer that I am now without having that background. I'm able to jump in. There are days where I'm just running into the breakdown room on a weekend, and I'm pushing through. We're pushing through a bunch of things for Monday, and that happens because I can do it. And the same thing with the sewing room. I will go in and work with the cutter, a little less now than before, but yeah, no, for sure. I think what's really great about that is that you actually round out your experience base. And I remember earlier, in my career, I had a little bit of that tortoise quality of like, wait, wow, why are they getting all the goody stuff? And later it obviously felt like there's a reason. And the other side to that is really to make sure that you're always kind, respectful, and appreciative of every person that you come in contact with, because you just never know when your paths will cross again. And I've seen it with other people where someone is not so nice, and then 10 years later you're you're sitting across the table, and there's a stiffness to the conversation that you know, and everyone brings something to the table. And I've always said too, the collaboration aspect of it is really by myself. I'm okay, but it really is my team. And with the team, we're able to bring anything to fruition.
I find too that I think one of the things that you said, at least in terms of like having that full process, I find that people that have kind of done the different jobs in the different departments, like you said, aren't that there's a respect there because they understand the jobs. And then when you talk to people, they also end up being really good leaders, which from a lot of the people that have worked with you have said that that is the case with you, which is true. I think it's because you can also jump in and provide the support. So it's like, but there's also a clear understanding of what that person does. So then you're not asking them to do things that are outside of the norm, or like it's not as demanding just because you know the job. I think that there's an understanding there and a respect that happens that really, I think is kind of like a skill set that's kind of, priceless. I think once you've done that, I think it really helps. So I'm glad that you brought that up as well.
Well, I think the thing about it is like we all encounter things we don't know. I mean,
correct.
The minute I've said it before, the minute I think I know everything, I'm out. Like I gotta go somewhere else. So together, we come across a new thing, and like, how are we going to figure this out? And it is the hive mind. It is what, it's my collective 30 years and your collective 20 years and your collective 15 years that are coming together. And between our, as a department, over 100 years of costuming, you're going to be able to solve just about any problem, and that's a good thing.
This is a good opportunity too to talk about, just at least quickly. Do you have any thoughts, especially since we just talked about how you came up, or any thoughts or resources for young costume designers or people that want to get in design, like thinking about it, like how they should start to approach that? Like if you're thinking about it and you want to do it, like where should you start?
Well, I think the thing that I think is uber important, and it's something that I did and I think it's helpful for any young costume designer, is to take the opportunity. If you're offered an assistant design position, take it.
Yes.
You are going to have this window to someone else's process that may not be your process.
Mm-hmm.
It may be completely foreign to how you process your art, but you are given the opportunity to get inside the head and the mind and the process of someone else. And for me, I designed for 15 years, and then I assisted some wonderful designers, and that in turn just sent me to the next level, because I was like, okay, this is how they do it. This is how this person does it, and that person does it. And again, I think if you given that opportunity, you got to snag it. It's so paramount. There are other people that are just straight designers. They're from fashion, they go to design. And somehow I think there's and I can only, it's my opinion, there might be a little bit of a hollowness to that ability, because you're not given the gift. And that was a gift. It was a gift to assist Daniel. It was a gift to assist Julie Weiss.
Mm-hmm.
And I would not say, no, if I had the chance to do it all over again, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
It's really, I think it's really one of the best things too, because people, what you don't realize is that on every single job, especially when you're assisting or when you're working closely with another creative, you do take on characteristics of them, or you do learn, especially if you're open to it. So that's one of the things that we'll tell our listeners too, is make sure that you are open to the opportunity, like Lewis said, and then also make sure that you are learning. That's the key point, that you're open to learning and growing. Because I know I've worked with so many different designers, and I literally pick up like at least one or two things from each of them, which has really helped me as well, because you get to learn and you get to see process, you get to see how they approach things, you get to see how they approach fittings, you get to see how they communicate. There's so many different things. So an assistant job, especially if you have the opportunity to do it, definitely don't turn it down, do it. I think also be open to doing other jobs, just to make sure that you're able to get in and to learn the department. So like Lewis did, he went up, he worked his way up, he started to learn this and that and that. And now that he's actually a designer himself, he has this full process, which I think that is really helpful as you go along in your career. So thank you for that advice. That was really great. I'm going to throw you a curveball question.
All right.
Completely random question. As far as costume design goes, or just in general, do you have a favorite Italian movie?
Well, I would say, anything from Fellini. That whole world, that whole black and white genre of Fellini films are incredible. I also love Spanish films, Almodovar, and I'm very fond of the early works. Yeah. I was in Rome, and I was at the Trevi Fountain, and I was like, oh my God, this is really it. And I was there when I was 16 briefly. And this is a very, very, very quick story. I had the opportunity to go to Europe as playing clarinet in an orchestra, and I was in Rome, and we had 2 days in Rome, and you could either do sightseeing or you could do shopping, and I picked the shopping. So I didn't get to see much of Rome, which is kind of funny. So I did that later in life. So there you go. There's a roundabout curveball answer.
I love that. I just always like to throw in at least one thing where it just kind of throws you off guard, but that was a really good answer. And ultimately, I think one of the things that's important too is like sometimes I like to see like what your influences are things you're inspired by just as a person. Like, do you go out in the world? Like, are there things or films you like to watch? Like when you're shopping, are you looking for specific things? Like, it's just kind of like how you interact with your creativity. Is there anything that sticks out that you know is like a tried and true thing that you like to do or like to kind of put your mindset in, or do you just kind of let the project take you?
It's research. It comes down to absolutely an incredible amount of research, and that comes from photo research, art research, films. I love to see a film that's done in the time. And not necessarily for anything more than just a look of the aesthetic. And very bland films of that time will tell you a lot about what the aesthetic was. And you'll pick up little details that when you think about the 70s, you think about garish and that there's a Jack Lemmon film, Catch the Tiger, I believe it's called. And it's a wonderful film set in the 70s, very elegant. And when I was prepping for Flash of Genius, I watched that a few times. And, apart from other things, it gave me an insight to the period, to those little details that you're not going to find in a catalog or in editorial. So yeah, it's research. Research is the baseline of everything.
When you're doing your research, that's like probably one of my favorite parts of the design process is like the research side. When you're doing your research, are you looking to just give me some of like the research you're looking to, obviously the internet, but like, are you still going to the library? Because I tell people sometimes that I go to the library and they look at me like, what? The library? And I'm like, yes, it's awesome.
So well, I actually, don't go to the library so much. I've collected books so often that for so long that I literally had to reinforce my second floor because it was caving into my living room because of the weight. So I live in a Victorian, and it was brutal. So they're now at a different location, but no, a lot of it I scour through my books, and what I do, even if like I'm doing, when I did research for Shape, you're doing research for 60s, and I was looking at 50s, and I was looking at 40s and 30s, and it goes into the hopper. So I have a digital library that I just have collected over the years. So, and even, Facebook, whatever, anything, it goes into the image inbox. Anytime I'm living my life, if I see something that I love, I'm throwing it into that and putting it into my own image library so that I can call upon it later.
I love that. The call upon is also a really good thing. Like I have books and digital stuff, and I'm constantly going back and forth. But something that you said that I think sometimes people will miss, which I learned from costume designers myself, was it was like, you know, a lot of the times I'm doing all the superhero stuff, right? So I don't get to play as much, but then I'll do something period. And then it's like, okay, we're doing 50s. So I'll get all into the 50s mode. And then the costume designer will be like, okay, like I really like this dress from like 1941 or whatever. And at first I was like, 40s? I thought we were doing 50s. And they're just like, well, you don't get rid of your clothes. Like you have stuff from the times before. And I was like, oh yeah, you know, like, so then I started to expand how I was thinking about it. And then I think that that really helps because then one thing influences the other and it kind of goes down the line. And so expanding your knowledge and actually having books, which I love. You made me feel better about my book collection because I keep buying them and I keep feeling like I have too many. And now I feel like I want to get to the point where my house is caving in.
Well, like I stopped after that for a little bit. I stopped, and then on this show, it's like I had one of my people came in, and their father was a teacher, actually, founder of one of the schools I went to, Galasso, in Toronto, and this is like 3/4 into a year and a half, and she's like, "Oh, I have these catalogs, and you might be interested in 1938." I'm like, 1938? We're doing 1938. We've been doing 1938. Yeah. Where have you been?
Yeah.
And these are like, original pattern drafting style catalogs, and yeah, it's amazing. So you just collect all that stuff, and design can come from any era, and you spoke to the whole thing about it's 2020 and this sweater is 5 years old, and your hat might be older, and then you have characters that really get stuck. They get stuck in their time when they looked their best, right?
That's right. I didn't understand that until later in life when you have like an aunt or something where you're looking back and you're like, wow, like it made sense, especially after I studied costumes. Like my aunt was totally stuck in the 70s or totally like, or someone older, you're like, wow, you really did stay doing makeup and hair and all of those things from the 60s.
Totally.
Like, doing the same style.
Totally. Totally. It's interesting. And, I still, I've had, some questionable repairs on, True Religion jeans and stuff like that. I'm like, dude, time to let go.
It's time.
So, but yeah, that's why you look back. You always look back because not everything, you didn't have a house fire and go out and buy all your clothes.
That's exactly correct. Now, I want to switch to something really quickly and talk to you. Just a quick kind of segue into you did Charlie Bartlett, and in that film, actually, it looks like it kind of plays off as like the teen comedies. It's like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Risky Business. Were you, when you were looking at those things, or like kind of like starting this project, did you look at stuff like Breakfast Club and all of those things? Like, were there any influences that you had with the kind of teen, kind of like having that character that kind of is like taking you through the story?
I think for we didn't go that far back.
Mm-hmm.
I think the underlying story about it was also the opioid, the prescription of drugs for kids, and so I think the character Charlie Bartlett, played by Anton, was basically the odd man out, the private school boy that went to public school. So I think what the baseline for that is researching all the different tribes at school and really trying to represent them, similar to Mean Girls, which I also worked on,
right,
with Mary Jane Ford.
Still very quotable.
Yes, very, very cool. So yeah, it was again, you try to be true to the storyline. So didn't really go that far back.
Yeah.
Because that was a whole different kind of era, but it was definitely a tip to that.
A tip to that, yeah, because I think that we were looking at some, or I looked at some research from the director, and he kind of said like he kind of was inspired to kind of take that and then push it forward, but then also there hadn't really been, especially at that time, many films that kind of started like kind of called back to that moment where you're like following this character through their daily life and kind of like especially like a younger character, and they're kind of like showing you the world. So I thought that was really interesting, especially because of our namesake Marilyn Vance. Like I kind of wanted that was an interesting.
Of course, yes.
But I also wanted to ask you specifically about that. Well, first, I also wanted to give a little shout out to Anton because, you know, rest in peace. I worked with him on Star Trek. He was wonderful.
Lovely man.
I just have to say he was wonderful. But I wanted to say also too, what was it like working with John Paul and Robert Downey Jr.?
Great. I mean, John was amazing. Always really supportive. Um, Sent my name off to Jay. There were a couple of occasions where Jay was looking for someone and it didn't work out, but a very collaborative. And, I think what's interesting about the relationship between costume designer and director is this, that there is a time frame that it's usually like the ivory tower between research and when things actually start rolling, and directors really want to be part of the process. And I think what ends up happening down the road is they just get so busy. There's so many things for them to do, and all of a sudden you are this beacon way out over here doing the wardrobe by yourself, and then you come in and you show, collaborate, and then pull back. And so John was great at giving the time and feedback. I think that the early days of doing that for me have been paramount on how I end up working, because I tend to be less needy. I do my work. We think a lot. I mean, who thinks about more about costume than costume designers, right?
Right.
So it's our world. So we formulated our opinions and our thoughts, and we're able to present a really great viewpoint to the director. And more often than not, it's like welcomed as that's been taken care of, and that's a good thing.
I like what you said too, because it's almost like these little windows and pockets of time, and like on each thing you're kind of establishing something in terms of like establishing your relationship with the director, then getting in there, and it's like you have this small little pocket of a window where you get to know them, kind of get to know their sensibilities, and then you infuse that with your work, and then you kind of go forward. I feel like that's the same with my job in a way, whereas like I have this window at the very beginning where the costume designer is not very busy, and I have to try and learn their aesthetic, what they like, all of these different things, and kind of try to figure out how we're going to get these designs going. And I mainly do that also as a protection and kind of a backup mechanism for the costume designer, in knowing that when they do get busy, when they're gone, I have to at least try to know like what the aesthetic is so that I can continue to push forward. So I think that's
sure.
I think it's really good to bring that up, because I never thought about it like that, but it is like pockets of like windows. And then by the time the drawings are going out to the meeting, I feel like I'm sending my kid off to school. Like, okay, good luck.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, I'm going to apologize, for all costume designers, as to like when you get so busy that you're like, I can't deal. I just can't deal. I got to get back to you later.
It's completely, I think that's one of the things that I've learned, especially I take pride in my job, at least in terms of knowing like when you're busy, it is my job to back you up. So it's like, I think that's why I try to get as much information as I can in that first few weeks, and then kind of learning is like, oh yeah, there's this thing or that, or like this designer really likes asymmetry or whatever it is, or like kind of knowing what the aesthetic is, so that while you're gone, like I'm like, go to your meeting, do your stuff. I got this. Right. Like I can flesh this out. We're good to go.
Which is great. It's awesome.
Yeah. But I do like that a lot, because I hadn't thought about it in terms of the full process, and knowing that everybody's kind of doing that same thing. You learn it, you figure it out. And like you said, not being needy and just being like, I got this, I'm going to move forward, kind of like build a great base.
That's not to say that, we don't have like lineups for the director, and
of course, like
pushing the production designer aside, going, you got him like all morning, you were out on a location.
Yeah, like it's my turn now. Yeah.
Get over there, because I need 3 minutes. So the production designer Tamara Deverell and I often have that thing where we're kind of like pushing each other aside.
Yeah, like a little bit like
Guillermo. And likewise, it's the same with a big department. She and I and our team on Nightmare Alley, we had 52 people at one point. And so it literally, you are a bowl of milk, and everyone is, all the kittens are like, right? And so then it's the same, you can totally see it, the same thing with the director,
Now, you just brought him up, so let's talk about Del Toro, because I want to transition into that, which is, how did you meet Del Toro? Like, how did that process, how did your collaboration come to be?
It goes back to Mama, when I was doing Mama, and he was executive producing. Never met the man, but actually that's not true. I met him very briefly on Mimic. I was doing FX, the series, in the same studio. I knew Marie Sylvie, who was doing Mimic. I went for a quick visit just to see the subway set, which was amazing. And I was introduced. I said, hello, incredible meeting you. And he never remembered, which is fine. But I was doing Mama, and we were in a fitting with Jessica Chastain, and she had put on her black rocker wig, and we had gone into the fitting room, and Andy and Barbara were outside and waiting for us to come out. And so we got it all together and opened the door, and there, to our shock, was Guillermo. And he's like, "Oh, you look fucking fantastic," to Jessica. And that was like literally the outfit she wore, the main outfit she wore in the film. And so that was incredible. A great intro to hello, my name is Louis.
Like, hello, like, I love your work. That's amazing.
Yes, exactly. So after that, he did a project with Miles Dale, who I've worked with for forever. And he did The Strain. So I did the pilot with him, and then went on to do the series for 3 years.
The Strain is my favorite, so I need to talk about that a little bit, just because I kind of nerded out about it. I just really like, I love the design aesthetic, but I love when he does vampires and all of that because of the creature designs and aesthetic. I also wanted to say that kudos to you, because it's like, I think one of the things that ends up happening design-wise, those shows you're moving really quickly, very fast, but also I can tell that you collaborate really well with your production designer, because I feel like the costume designs and the art direction, to me, always seem like they mesh together. It doesn't feel like you're working separately. But I wanted to talk to you, or just ask you some questions specifically about your design of the master. So can you walk me through how that happened, knowing that he's this big, and like what you guys did with the cloaking and all of that stuff?
Well, so just real quick, funny anecdotal story is when we were doing the pilot with Guillermo. The script says a shadow arises from the plane, and cut to, the next scene.
Right.
So I said to the producer, "Oh, well, what's this? Are we actually gonna have an actor?" And no, we're just gonna need some fabric. Just gonna need some fabric.
Of course, they always.
And so in one of the meetings with Guillermo, he's like, "Fabric? No, we need a costume." And so Robert Maillet was cast, and he's 7'3", I think, and size 22 shoe, and 2 of my hands, and so we worked in quarter scale in order to kind of get the proportions together, and working from the illustration. From the graphic novel, I wanted to be true to that process. At the end of the day, that the cape had over 130 meters of fabric, 7 layers. It had a hydraulic system inside, because we wanted it very long for the dramatic shots, but God help you, you couldn't walk with it. So inside there were pulleys that would lift the inners up, and we had 6 of them at one point.
I seem to remember you telling me that there was a maquette that you ended up gifting to Del Toro, correct?
Yes.
I remember that.
Yes.
And so that was the maquette that you guys used to work out the scaling.
Yeah. So what we did, that was the scaled body, but I redid it in full blown beautiful. The embroidery was sent to India. And it was literally a carbon copy maquette of the costume.
Now, quickly, before we kind of transition, because I want to get to Nightmare Alley, I wanted you to talk about the fact that you have had a prolific kind of television career and kind of what that's taught you, because I know television is really fast. You have to make quick decisions. You're also trying to get your best work on the screen. So kind of talk to me about what you learned during that process and how it's helped you now.
Yeah, I mean, I started off in TV, and you know, TV back in the day when TV was kind of a dirty word, and it taught me a ton, and my team, whether I was designing or whether I was assisting, we, you know, you're just thrown so many different scenarios and problems, so you problem solve very quickly. You're able to just, you know, work around the FedEx route, work around the import route, work around anything that you need to do. And we, you know, I did a show called Top Cops where we reenacted stuff. You know, it wasn't art, but we had badges made every week for whatever police force. We had patches made. It was like it was a hamster wheel basically. And so a lot of times that's what TV is. Now it's a lot more artistic, which is amazing. But a lot of that work has provided me with that ability to make those quick decisions, or at least quick rationales towards a decision. And that's been wonderful. It's a great training ground, you know.
Yeah.
And again, for someone who wants to design or assist design, you know, get your chops in a TV series, because you're going to learn a lot.
Yeah, it feels like it challenges you to kind of think on your feet. You learn a lot, but also I think one of the things that I loved the most, I did a lot of work with Anne Foley on the first few seasons of Shield,
Yes.
and I saw how fast, like I would go with her, we'd draw something, then it would go directly up to the executive producers, and then if they approved it, it would come back, and then the seamstress or the cutter fitter would immediately say, like, I mean, this is like within a matter of days sometimes, and it's something that really could be a complex design. So I saw the kind of quick thinking on the feet that you have to do, or they throw something at you at the last minute, and you know, then you have to make it that day or find something. So I just think it really, after you get out of that, it feels like you can do anything.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, if it's like even The Strain, you know, we had one continuous storyline, but we also had all these flashbacks. So you know, we had you know, World War II coming in one door and Rome going out the other door, and this is while we're doing the vampire apocalypse. So it allows you to really multitask, and then that whole level of quality and quality control and artistic is just about where you sit.
How were you able to, because this is a good question, how are you able to balance, like you said, you've got, you know, World War II, and then you've got, you know, Roman Empire, and then you've got, like, how are you able to keep yourself artistically balanced in those? Did you approach one at a time and then build up, and so they were all going? Or like, how did you manage that in your mind?
So we were lucky to get some of the scripts early.
Okay.
Because I kept on asking anything that had to do with period. Like it was a 7-day shoot or 8-day shoot. So please don't give me a script with 8 days to prep Rome. Rome, gladiators and such. So we were able to do the research early enough, and then I had one of my principal shoppers was both fabric and research, so she was able to move ahead through the scripts, and you know, because we're dealing with the day in day out fittings and the establishing and all of that, so she was able to move ahead and do that early work.
I hear what you're saying is that I need an assistant.
Well, come on.
I think sometimes mentally, I think one of the hardest things as an artist is the switch. Like one day I'm working on a superhero, and the next I'm working on like a secretary from like 1940. And I'm like, wait, like my mind is like, wait a minute. Like it's hard sometimes. And I think sometimes it's that control. Like you want to really dive into each one, but I think it's like biting it off in pieces. But I'm always curious of how different artists manage kind of that rapid switch, especially if you're doing it all at the same time.
And sometimes, I mean, every day is like lightning round, you know, Final Jeopardy, and you're like, okay, go, and then okay, and then this and that, and so you at some point I do say, okay, wait, give me a minute, I gotta you know, I've just been in the cutting room, and we've been dealing with a problem with you know, some sort of putting something together, and now I'm going to the breakdown area, and they want me to figure out something else. So sometimes you need that break, but it is, again, that episodic helps you to be able to make those quick decisions. And most of the time they're good. not every time.
Not every time, but
not, unfortunately, you know, the reality is not every time. You know?
Well, one thing that I kept with me this entire time, I worked with Colleen Atwood really early in my career, and I asked her if she ever had, like if she, I was just really curious and I wanted to ask her questions, and I asked her if she ever had like design regrets or things that she thought didn't work. And she said, you know, and it kind of like in the way she answered it, it was like everybody kind of does, but she said, I don't worry about them because I know that for better or worse, you know, I tried to find the character and design something. And then ultimately, she just said, I know I'll get to do it again, meaning that she knew that like project to project, she was going to be able to keep moving and keep designing and keep learning and keep growing. And so I kind of kept that with me because it really did help to kind of just kind of put it into perspective. It's like you put something out, you try your best. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's like, eh. And then other times it's just like you find that little magical pocket. But the key thing is to know that you'll keep going. And I thought that was really great, because otherwise I would just sit here like I really should have. I should have, and it's like no, it's just art. Just let it go. Just keep creating.
Exactly. You have to. You really have to.
So let's transition into Nightmare Alley, because I think that's the topic of the day. That's your most recent project, highly anticipated. Talk about the project first and kind of like walk us through like kind of how you started your process, or at least in terms of like what you were kind of doing.
I was shooting a film in Australia, and I got a call that this was happening, and would I, you know, they were interested in me doing it, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. So, of course, the research started while in Australia, finishing off Monster Problems, and at that point, we were going to go to camera pretty quickly, and I had 3 days off between Monster Problems coming back from Australia and then running over to Europe. And so I couldn't do my own research because I just didn't have enough time. And I had someone who I value and have worked with for forever start doing the research. And I went to Rome, Spain, and London, and started pulling clothes and meeting with all the rental houses, and then did that for 3 weeks, and then came back and continued doing the research and meetings with Guillermo. As it happened, you know, we had a break of 11 weeks, and then, you know, the show just never died because of COVID. And at the end of it, it was 18 months. But yeah, that was how that started. It was very lightning fast.
It's based off a novel, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So did you use that kind of as a base? Like, were you reading and kind of doing research based off of that and kind of trying to infiltrate it? Like, what was your kind of thought process in terms of how to start?
So yeah, having read the novel while I traveled, but Guillermo wanted us to really not, you know, there was the movie for him. There were certain aspects of the original movie that he hated, that he wanted us to really not look at and not use. And it was really, you know, coming together with these two worlds. So and for those who've read the book, there's the carnival world and then the city world. And so we really work towards designing the color palettes for each, the finishes for each, and started curating a collection. Not only doing fabric swatching, buying fabrics in Italy and Spain, an amazing notion place in Madrid that is like notion heaven, and buying tons of fabrics and starting that curating of a collection of pieces and fabrics.
Were you using the color palettes too to kind of distinguish like the different groups or different characters? Like, how were you kind of using that to kind of, you know,
so I mean, we basically had two different worlds. So there was a whole color palette for the carnival world and a color palette for the city. You know, one being warm, one being cool, and I don't want to go too into it.
Sure.
But definitely there were two different worlds, and so you know, for me, when I'm out and I'm seeing things, it really is, whether I can envision something being built out of that fabric, or that button, or that finding the feathers for hats, what have you. And that reading the script, it was, having watched the movie, of course, but having read the script, there was more to it. There was more, more about the psychology than the original film. So yeah, so that was the beginning.
And then do you have anything, especially because I know that like the cast is kind of amazing. So it's kind of amazing. So did you have any kind of like, was there anything in there that like, were you excited? Were you nervous? Were you just like, were you ready to dive in with the cast, or like kind of like, how did you approach that?
I was ready to die.
Yeah. Die in, yeah. Die out.
No, I mean, it's a crazy, amazing cast, every time another name was, Guillermo was mentioning it, I think we're going to have this and we're going to have that. I'm like,
oh yeah. Like, oh really? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Right. And in certain parts of the film, we have very, very few cast, and then other parts we have, everybody, or just about everybody. And I was like, oh my God, that's going to be one hell of a lineup and one hell of a, right, a ramp up. No, the cast are top drawer, absolutely. And I have to say, there were a couple of occasions where I'm like, I'm not worthy or something, but we got through it.
Now, question, since you're pretty much just finishing this,
still
he's still on it.
Still
so
rapping.
Still working on it right now, which is why also we can't say too much about it. I just wanted to kind of touch on it. What was it like working on this during the pandemic?
So, interestingly enough, we started filming before.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were filming in Buffalo the first week of March. Mm-hmm. And then we came back to Canada, and we just shut down. And then we had 28 weeks off and came back, and it was a completely different world, obviously, for everybody involved. And, when it first happened, the whole industry was like, oh, this is like Ebola, and like you have to have everything. You can't touch a pin without having it being disinfected before someone else touches it. And so it took everyone a minute to kind of really sort through what was realistic and what wasn't. But it was tricky. And luckily for me, I was able to still go to set, because I've heard that there are some costume designers in studios that are not allowing the designer to go to set. And for me, that's like, as a designer, that's where you make sure that the cherry is on top and not leaning. And, it's all about the final look of that costume.
What's where the work happens. I'm excited to hear you say that, because that was one of the things that I really worried about. I was like, but if you can't go to set, how do you, like, that's literally a big part of your job. And I know that was causing issues there. Like, I heard that there was a few designers where they were given, like, you can either be on set or you can be doing fittings, but they've made them choose, like, where it's like, and they're like, okay, well, obviously then I have to do my fittings. But then they weren't able to go, or they would have to make sure everything was prepped before. So the fact that you were able to go, I think, is really good, because that means that we're starting to progress to where it's like, at least they understand it more and they know that you guys need to be there.
Well, and I was tested every day, and wore PPE, and kept a very low profile away from work. And frankly, there was 6 hours between the time I started work and the time I finished, and the time I finished till the time I started. So it was just going home and going to sleep. There wasn't anything else happening.
Right.
So, but it was interesting. We had to change the way we did fittings, and going forward, I think we're going to have to split our fittings up so that there is the brain trust isn't, that question that you get asked is, who did you spend more than 15 minutes with, if something comes up, and then at that point the brain trust could be totally taken away. So it adds a lot of stress, obviously, and we have to be sensitive to every last person in the department. If we have one person that is immune compromised and feeling more stress about it, then we have to respect that, and work with that person's comfort level.
I'm glad that you guys were able to get through it, and knowing that we're still continuing to kind of move forward and learn. That's been really important. But also, I appreciate you sharing, because I know people are worried about it and also trying to figure out like what the logistics are. But I think as we get back to work, it just needs to be like we're learning more and more ways to kind of plow forward safely. So that's a really good thing to hear.
And it's that habit, it is the habit of, wiping your hands. And sometimes I feel like I'm Jack Nicholson, is as good as it gets, where it's just like, gas, hand,
yeah.
door handle, cover it with my hand, and cover my hand with whatever to open that door handle. And so, I mean, you just get into that rhythm of doing that. And then the stress, for me anyway, the stress drops.
Yeah.
When I'm, I used to talk on the phone grocery shopping. I don't do that anymore because I really want to focus on what I'm doing.
I think that one of the habits I picked up the most that I notice now is like, even when every time I get back in, or if I go somewhere and I get in my car, there's an immediate like, all over kind of moment before I start.
Totally.
Now, the key thing is do you have, we're coming to the end, so I want to ask you, do you have anything up next? You're just still working and kind of finishing this out. What's next for you?
So, I mean, there's something on the horizon that is with Guillermo. So I'm hoping to do for Netflix, which I don't think I should mention it quite yet because it's, not quite gelled completely, but it's it'll be interesting. It'll be next level. When you're talking about TV and hamster wheel, it'll be a little bit like that because it'll be different stories all combined together. So
I'm super excited now.
Yeah, no, it'll be good. So I'm hoping, that looks like that's what we're doing in a couple of months, and I'm looking forward. I was hoping to get to Europe, but it looks like I'm going to have a staycation. And so that's basically what's happening.
And then tell our viewers where they can go and follow you on social media.
Well, I'm on Facebook, and I have Louis_costumes at Instagram.
Perfect.
And my website is going to go live probably in about a week or so, and that's louismcicada.com. And that's basically it. I hardly ever use Twitter. I'm like Twitter. I'm just a voyeur. I'm just like, oh, okay.
Make sure you guys go and follow Louis, because he really does. He's working. I think at a high level, but he's also just the kindest person. And also his design aesthetic, I personally really enjoy, because I know that you put a lot of work and time to it, and it shows up on screen. And we thank you for coming with us today, or joining us. And sharing your stories. So make sure you guys go and follow him. I want to give a shout out to the Ibarra family, related to Martika Ibarra, who are big fans of Louis and Del Toro's work. They love you, and they wanted, we wanted to give it out because they just wanted to let you know that they love your work. And the Designing Hollywood team would like to thank you for coming on the show. We'd also like to thank all our viewers. I'm going to start this over. Give me a second. We'd like to thank our viewers for tuning in, and we also want to thank our sponsor, Gardena Cinema, the only old-fashioned single-screen standalone neighborhood movie theater still in operation in the Los Angeles area, owned and operated by Judy Kim and the Kim family since 1976. So please go and support Gardena Cinema. Make sure you follow and subscribe Designing Hollywood podcast for past and new episodes on YouTube, iTunes, and all podcast platforms. And also now on Amazon and Siri Voice Search. I cannot talk today. Follow me, your host, on Instagram at Phil_Boutte, Boutte. It's Boutte, not Bout, not Boot. If it's not funny, you're not saying it right. It is love to all of you. Thank you, Louis, and we will see you guys again.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thank you to our sponsor, Eddie Marks with ragvan.com. Ragvan is Hollywood's favorite place to rent fully equipped, high-quality trailers used by the entertainment industry to transport costumes and garments to and around filming sets in Hollywood. Also, thank you to our viewers. Be sure to follow Designing Hollywood Podcast on social media and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, and our YouTube channel for complete past and current episodes.